Hi, this is Pat Moorhead with More Insights and Strategy, and we are here for another 6-5 Insider with this incredible Qualcomm chief economist that we'll bring in later. But Daniel Newman, how are you, my friend?
Happy to be back. Happy to be doing this remote. We've done a few of these live now. We're kind of in the rotation. I'm getting in the groove of sitting down and seeing people in the flesh, but also we still have all kinds of world events, geopolitics, macroeconomic things that are keeping us from getting back to a complete normalcy. So here we are. And by the way, macro events, geopolitics, having a podcast about that topic today. And boy, Pat, this is one of my favorite things.
I know you always pretend to be the chief economist, but let's introduce Qualcomm's chief economist, Kirti Gupta, and who's going to be heading up a very exciting IP event in Washington, D.C. that we're going to talk about at the end of the podcast. So with this, let's introduce Kirti. Kirti, how are you?
Hello, Pat and Dan. Nice to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hopefully, our next event will be in person. I think I've been on the road for 4 of the last 5 weeks, which has been crazy. And now I just want to go back into my hole of my office and not move for a couple of weeks.
I relate to that, but we'll see you in Washington in April 5th.
We got so much of the sort of in between. We realize how productive we can be when we don't travel. And I think a lot of us sort of got into that groove. And now we get on the road and we get back to normal levels of productivity. And we all feel like we're not doing enough. And so it's kind of this back and forth feeling like I want to get out, but at the same time, I want to get back to my office because I get so much done when I'm there. So hopefully we can find balance and some sanity here because there doesn't seem to be much in the world these days. And we're going to talk more about that on this show. But Kirti, in the spirit of this, of introducing you, first time joining 6-5 Insider, talk about the role of a chief economist at a large tech company like Qualcomm. What does that mean? What do you do?
Yeah, this idea of chief economist, office of the chief economist, has become a pretty common one over the last 20 years in the tech industry. Every single one of our tech peers has one. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Uber, Yelp, Zillow, Redfin, you name it. And frankly, each one of them look quite different based on what they do. But there's one thing that's similar, and that's common to tech. It's the economy of scale. So for these offices to be able to explain the value proposition of their technology to the stakeholders is critical. This is part of what we do at Qualcomm, right? We try to explain the value, evidence-based approach for the value of the mobile technology and of our technology to the rest of the world, putting really, numbers to the stories here, right? Method to the madness. And the other thing I would say that is unique and specific to us at Qualcomm is we're working on technologies, whether it's 5G or semiconductors. It's the thing that the geopolitical axis is currently spinning upon. So we really work at the intersection of legal, policy, and business for unpacking these issues and providing the evidence-based analysis for them.
Yeah, so Kirti, you must be a very popular person right now, given everything that's going on. But one thing we absolutely wanted to hit you with first was inflation, right? Everybody agrees that it's happening. Nobody seems to agree on why it's happening or how long it's lasting. And I wonder if you could just shed some quick light on this.
Isn't that the topic of the day, as it should have been? Removing my Qualcomm or tech hat off for a moment, because tech has growth opportunities that go beyond the usual productivity dynamics because of scale. But frankly, personally, as an economist, and I think many of us have been concerned about inflation for a long time, and it has finally caught on. I would say that real inflation has been probably around for a while. It has just not been captured in official figures as well as now. And perhaps we are still underestimating it. Bottom line, you would hear officially the two factors conflating with each other and making inflation, driving it together. One is, of course, increased supply, because when you print more money, you increase the supply of money, and it's really that straightforward. And the second is basically this constraint in the supply chain that is creating shortages. So on the other hand, there is more demand because of this increased supply of money, and on the other hand, there is lower supply because of these choke points. But, having all that being said, I do worry about inflation not going away in the short run in 2022 and moving forward beyond that, because I think we have entered this point for a long time coming when we have printed a lot. We have had many stimulus packages, and we've had a loose fiscal policy or lower interest rates for a long time. And time will tell whether the Fed can really increase the interest rates fast enough and high enough for us to turn the clock back.
Yeah, and of course, it seems like every day there's a new factor, Kirti, that's impacting inflation, right? I mean, of course, the virus and the pandemic had a big issue. It definitely spurned the supply chain. You have to wonder to some extent if we were able to more quickly alleviate the supply chain, get supply up, if you could be more balanced in terms of how many interest rate hikes are going to be required. And now we add in a macro event like a war, which is having huge inflation impacts on things that hurt everyday consumers. Gas, of course, is the most obvious one, but groceries. I mean, anyone that does the shopping in the household has probably noticed their bills have gone through the roof. So you've seen a huge spike in luxury items in the high end of the market because they can't get supply. They can't get enough high-end housing and automobiles and yachts and all that stuff. But the real pain is in that, in that everyday item area where we just can't seem to create enough and alleviate enough. And then raising rates is hard on a lot of the same group, because now you have those same people paying higher interest on their credit cards, higher interest on their car loans, their student loans. So it's a really vicious cycle that it seems that we did a lot of this to ourselves. But you know what? We could probably talk about this for the whole show. And I'm glad we had the chance to get you on this, Kirti, but I'm going to pivot, because doing the role you do at Qualcomm, I want to talk a little bit about 5G. Standards, which your leadership event is going to focus a lot on. We now have this global 5G standard. I think we can all agree it's been transformational. It's transforming industries. It's transforming our lives. Anybody that's got access to a good 5G connection, millimeter wave especially, can just realize how great it is. But there's some turbulence. We hear about things like decoupling and bifurcation of markets and standards. Talk about that, because it isn't all straightforward and all built on a standard that everybody is just saying, yes, we accept that.
Yeah, so, I was talking about tech being an economy of scale. That's critical in today's world. So when we talk about standards, for example, let's start with, the famous wireless communications or cellular standards that we all use in our cell phones or tablets that drive the world, or the Wi-Fi standards you're probably using for connectivity. These are largely global standards. They are standards that the entire world and the entire global industry is adhering to. And that's just how, the industry has evolved. It has realized that if we have this economy of scale, then we can create an ecosystem where different companies around the world can pool their resources for joint innovation. Now, with the current crisis, I think in Russia, Ukraine, we have unfortunately realized that war is not inevitable. It should, we're hopefully going to learn our lesson as a global society. But tech stands to lose and consumers stand to lose if we move away from these crises with a decision to bifurcate the world in different factions. And that's one discussion that's, I think, being had right now, whether it's these global standards or whether it's semiconductors. There's a real push because of these, global events to separate and bifurcate. And in some instances, we're going to have to do that. in the instances of driving these global technologies that, really come to fruition 5-10 years into the future, to join the innovation agendas across the landscape for different companies. If we bifurcate and we live in these different worlds and develop these different technologies separately, not only do we lose the benefit of a joint innovation as consumers that we all enjoy, lower prices, etc., we also make the world a more dangerous place. So I hope that we are going to move away from this dynamic with a more, let us say, measured and surgical approach that allows us to continue to create a global tech ecosystem.
Yeah, I think those are sage words. And, I like to simplify it for my audiences in terms of you just have, what's more productive, having multiple people working on the same problem at the same time or separating them? And if we do have these types of separation, we might get back to the world, even in smartphones, where you go to another country and your smartphone doesn't work, kind of like we did 15 years ago. Or an application builder builds an application and they have to do 4 different versions of it. And they probably won't do 4 versions of it to work on 4 completely different platforms. So it's definitely something that it would be nice to get back to, but it certainly doesn't look like we're headed in that direction. I'd like to switch to sustainability. I watched your panel on the Economist Sustainability event recently. You talked about how 5G enables green, more sustainable economy. I had heard about sustainability on the 5G standpoint, not necessarily the green part, but how does it support both of them?
So let me start by sharing, Pat. I think you've already heard this, but 5G isn't just faster 4G or faster than the previous generation of wireless. From 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G, or the generations, Gs we call them in the wireless technology, we at Qualcomm, I think we've been transforming the world. There are more mobile device connections today than number of people on the planet. But I still think of 5G as a paradigm shift, because it isn't just about connecting people to people, it's about connecting everything everywhere. So think of, connected cars, smart factories, transportation, health and education, etc. Because of that, it's really critical that this future, I would call it the infrastructure of our future connected world, the railroads, the waterways, the airways of tomorrow, support a sustainable planet. There's no planet B. So I think our engineers have really worked hard to create features that make 5G a more sustainable, greener technology for every unit of data that is consumed. By creating many, many technical features, I can put I'm an economist, but still a recovering engineer. I can put my engineering hat on and unpack it a little bit. But bottom line, when we did a study on 5G and sustainability, it is on our website, it shows enormous progress in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 375 million metric tons by 2025, better water optimization, saving water up to the usage of 4 million households in the United States every year, lower use of pesticides, cutting them by basically half, and so on. And that is because of, essentially going in and changing various use cases because of making them more connected. Connected farms, connected cars, and transportation, etc.
Yeah, there's certainly...
So I'm excited about a technology that's not even connecting us, but is creating a sustainable future.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of focus on sustainability right now, and it's good to see you kind of pulling the threads, tying together the interest both from an internal and an external viewpoint. I want to pivot back a little bit to the shortage. So you alluded to this. Mm-hmm. We saw how fast digital accelerated in the pandemic, drove huge demand for mobile devices, PCs. You guys, as Qualcomm, had some great numbers and results despite managing all kinds of challenges in the supply chain. But the chipset shortage is a real issue. It is contributing to inflation. It is contributing to broader challenges, and some of the bifurcations and such that you mentioned are a byproduct of the world not agreeing on how this should get handled. So what is your take? How do we handle this right now, given all of the external circumstances we're dealing with?
Whether it's standards or it's semiconductors, maintaining a global ecosystem would be beneficial for all of us, somehow finding a way to do that. Let me just share with one example. Frankly, this business of chip shortage is nothing new in the industry. This chip industry, as you probably know, is a cyclical one. We have seen shortages before and we have handled them. The pandemic has, revealed some of these long-standing cycles. But what has changed is, of course, the geopolitical nature of our planet. So there's a lot of discussion about resiliency in the semiconductor supply chain, and that is a good thing. Take a regular smartphone. It has over 200, different chip components in it, and they come from over 45 countries, maybe more. Now, if that weren't going to happen, we should absolutely create more resiliency. But if we were to go down a path, which I don't think we are thinking about, but I'm taking a story to an extreme point of view for the sake of illustration. Let's say that a country decides that we want to be completely self-sufficient in a semiconductor supply chain and supply all of those components within country in-house. The cost of the phone will not be $1,000, it would be $10,000. It would be much more expensive for everybody if we reach a point where we try to walk away from these very intricate global dependencies that have been created over a period of time. So again, I think the answer, whether it's standards or it's semiconductors, is to make sure that we are able to maintain a global, intricate, interdependent ecosystem, reach the economy of scale that we have created over these decades, and continue to lead in what we have led in the most: R&D, design, innovation that creates these technological shocks, which is frankly the reason there is economic growth in the world.
Yeah, I'm glad you swung back to the kind of the balkanization of economies and how this relates to the chip shortage as well. I mean, your $10,000 phone is spot on, particularly depending on where it's manufactured. And we need to be very careful at the blockades that we put up, either virtually or physically. I want to shift to IP here. Daniel and I, our companies have both written a lot about intellectual property and about its proper place and the way that we think it should be looked at and regulated in order to just bring a bounty of benefits out there. You've talked of IP protection being important for what you call an innovation economy. What exactly does this mean?
So, intellectual property is one of the, frankly, only tools that small companies, inventors, and startups have to be able to protect their ideas. Let me just take a step back and remember that we all live in a knowledge-based economy today, right? 30 years ago, most of the assets in a firm used to be tangible assets. 80% of them were physical or labor assets. Today, it's the exact opposite. Most of the assets for any company, for any firm, are intangible assets, ideas. And how do firms protect their ideas? Well, it depends who you are. But sure, if you're a small company, you're a startup, you're an inventor, you can only protect ideas with the help of intellectual property, those kinds of systems. Because if you're a large firm, if you're vertically integrated, if you are a big platform, you have many other ways to protect your ideas, right? You can vertically integrate. You can take your ideas, put them in the product, take them to market. You can use adjacent markets to monetize your idea, right? You have idea in one market, you monetize it in another. You can use conglomerate effects. Small companies, inventors, they don't have these tools. They have only this, simpler tools that is provided as an institution for a reason. IP as an institution was established to incentivize people to disclose their ideas to the public and give it away for free after X number of years, in which they get exclusive rights to use that idea for their inventions. So if we take that away, I think we will find that we will not live in a world in which 1,000 flowers can bloom and innovation can occur from anywhere, from any small companies, inventors, etc. Only the big will have the privilege to innovate. Now, ask yourself, when you're living in this world and hearing the news today, do you want to live in a world where either the big vertical integrators have the privilege to innovate, or large state-owned enterprises have the privilege to innovate, because that's what they share in common, right? They share the largeness and the scale. I think that would be a poorer and less democratic world. So, IP really goes to the heart of the economic importance of driving economic growth for everyone.
It's good to see, Kirti, you in this role, and obviously a company that sort of fits that very large profile, being Qualcomm, fighting to make sure that the information is democratized so people understand what's at stake here. I do think larger entities tend to get all the credit for innovation. I do think there are some challenges there that need to continue to be discussed. I believe that the fact that we actually are having a debate societally about incentivizing companies that invest in research and development decades ahead of new products being able to be brought to market, and having a punitive nature to some of them by actually supporting implementers that want to penalize the inventors and the innovators, it's heartbreaking. It's actually heartbreaking to see. And of course, as we know in this world, there's always bigger. And you guys have had those battles in the past. There's always bigger. So no matter how big you get, you need to protect the people that are driving real, meaningful innovation. And part of how you're doing this is by participating, Kirti, as the executive director at Leadership, which is a IP conference. I do believe I attended it, actually, the last time it was in person. A very, very interesting event, a place to learn so much more about all the things we talked about today. I'm sure it's going to be a great discussion. Here's your moment. All right, you got the big event. Tell us what's going on April 5th in DC. What's this event all about? Why should people be paying attention, tuning in, and participating in various channels to the leadership community?
So I would say, Dan, that ipleadership.org, you can visit us there. Here's why you must attend it, and it's so time critical. It's this unique moment in time when we need to have these discussions on innovation, intellectual property, and competition under the broader umbrella of what's happening today, the geopolitics of technology, the importance of economic growth, and national security. This discussion puts everything in a common nexus. It tries to identify what are the connections between these various issues, so that we don't look at intellectual property in isolation or innovation policy in isolation. These are tools for us to achieve the broader objectives we're all asking ourselves societally right now. What kind of innovation do we want to see? What kind of world do we want to live in? And where is it that we must be investing today to create the right pillars for tomorrow? This is going to be the discussion. It isn't going to be just about, some intellectual property issues and some esoteric, competition policy issues. It's going to start from the broader question of what are our big objectives as society? What role does national security play? Where does it intersect with, standards and semiconductors and intellectual property, and all these issues our geopolitical axis is spinning upon. So I hope to see you there in person on April 5th after a 2-year hiatus. Glad to be back in person. And I think we have timed it in a way that people are just coming out, stepping out, and want to be interactive in person with each other.
Yeah. So Kirti, I think it sounds like a great event. I'm going to double check my calendar, and if not, I will hopefully be able to catch it on video. But hey, our time has come to an end here, and I just want to thank you so much for joining us. I mean, we learned about what a chief economist at a large tech company does. We teased you a little bit up front, or you teased us a little bit with inflation. Dan pretended to be economist during the inflation part. We talked about the minuses of decoupling what right now is a global tech economy, which includes IP and not just manufacturing. We talked about sustainability, chip shortage, but last but not least, the importance of IP protection and the amazing, incredible, must-see event in Washington, D.C. in person, Leadership, April 5th. Be there. So just want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. You are great hosts, and I love listening to 6-5.
Thanks. My God, there we go. And if there's something you don't like about the show, let Dan know, and let me know exactly what you like. But thanks again. And Daniel and I are going to wrap. We hope to have you on the show very, very soon. And good luck on the event.
See you there.
Bye-bye. And I just love it. I tell you, I grew up in a household of intellectual property lawyers. My brother is one. My dad was a GC, but it was all about IP. So I got a little bit, indoctrinated, and I am the loser son or kid who didn't get a law degree. So I'm the only male in the family.
There are plenty of people in the world that are probably quite pleased to not know another lawyer, Pat. And so, but all jokes aside, I'm still kind of stewing on the whole pretending to be thing. But you know what? I'll get over it. I'll get over it. We're all. This is good. That was great, though. She's brilliant. Like I said, right now, I think the world, because of the media, the access, the events that have taken place, have grown to be more curious than ever before about macroeconomics, geopolitics, and as we've seen, every time we think we get over one hurdle, there's a new one. So it is endless. And so the more aware we become as a society, the more we can use democracy to our advantage here. And of course, as we try to bring technology to the global stage, we are seen, Patrick, and here in the U.S. as one of the leading countries, one of the leading thinkers collectively. So I'm really glad we can use this platform to share this with the world.
Absolutely. I want to thank our viewers, and if you're looking for probably the best content in intellectual property, bringing experts, policymakers together for discussion and debate on issues like we talked about, check out the leadership event. We'll have some information in the show notes. So with that, have a great week, and thank you for tuning in for this 6-5 Insider.